Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Monday, June 16th, 2025. Last week, we spoke about the revival of one of Disney's most famous cartoon series, Phineas and Ferb. Today, we're discussing a whole other revival. It's a new TV show on Syfy, our first Syfy channel review of this year, based on the 47-issue comic that ran from 2012 to 2017, created by Tim Seeley and illustrated by Mike Norton. Now, this feels like a who's on first scenario because we're talking about revivals all the time, but this is actually a show. We've talked about reboots all the time. We did a show called Reboot. There's also a show based on a book called Rivals last year. So it's easy to get tongue-tied out of all this.
This whole week, I've been calling this show Rivals, or Revivals. Like, I get it, it's a revival, but I've been, having to train my mind to do that.
And it doesn't help that there's a Stephen King book, which was supposed to be adapted. It came out in, 2013 called Revival, and it was supposed to be adapted by Mike Flanagan. That got shelved in 2020, so a lot of people jumping into this series think that's what it's going to be, but it's not. So tell me a little bit, because you read some of this comic.
I read the first 2 volumes of it.
And did it remind you, because the last comic you read for this podcast was El Eternata, and that's also a horror comic, but did it remind you of that at all?
This one seemed like it was grounded more in reality, which you're dealing with kind of zombies, so I know that seems weird, but El Eternaut dealt with aliens, so it was out of space. This seems like it's just more like the 4400, where dead people start coming back to life.
So it's still supernatural horror, but yeah, I've heard that it's kind of the way that it was pitched, at least, by Aaron B. Kuntz and Luke Boyce, the 2 show creators, was that it's like a Mayor of Easttown meets a zombie type world. So I wouldn't assume it's like The Bondsman or Cassandra. We haven't done a lot of supernatural horror reviews this year because there just isn't a lot of supernatural horror out there. Syfy itself, it feels like that's a dying channel. If you look at the TV show lineup right now, they still have Surreal Estate, they have Resident Alien and The Ark, but that's about it.
I remember a couple years ago, that was where The Expanse was being played, and it looked like this big budget. I mean, it looked great for a TV series, and here, now I feel like Syfy has this kind of preconceived notion that if it's going to be on there, it's going to be very shoestring budget.
Kind of like Discovery, they went toward the reality programming and they ditched the original take of, we want to put a lot of money towards stuff because they realized they couldn't compete. At the same time, The Ark, I remember you gave it a bad review. You didn't like the first few episodes.
I think it was on my worst of list.
Because it looked cheap. And I think it did look cheap. However, the reviews were interesting because it said as the season went on, one thing I have noticed about Syfy is they try to make the most bang for their budget. So by the end of the series, sometimes it can actually wrap up better than some of the Netflix shows and stuff because it has a long-term view of what it wants to be. Like in this comic book, I'm pretty sure Aaron B. Kuntz and Luke Boyce, they plotted out not only just this season, but the next one as well.
Yeah, because the first episode, it covers only really the first issue of the graphic novel, but I assume that it's not going to be 47 episodes. They're probably going to differentiate from the story quite a bit.
From your mouth to the creator's ears, because they literally said that in the first episode, you're probably not going to see too many changes from the comics, but as the show goes on, there's a lot of stuff for the readers to kind of start to question because they do change a lot. And Tim Seeley was there in the writer's room seeing these changes and being like, why didn't I do that originally?
It's kind of like Sunny. Yeah, where the first episode was very much like the book, and then as the series went on, it's almost like, what is this completely different story?
Right, and so I have some questions for you just to start off. Can you tell when it takes place?
No, but I think it's just present day, right?
No, because everybody has a flip phone and stuff. I thought you were going to say but Syfy told them they couldn't put a year down. So they had to change it from being 2008, which was how they shot it, and then they just had to get rid of any references to 2008 and just have it in the past sometime. I guess they didn't want social media being too involved in the fact that the dead were coming back to life.
Yeah, right. Because now it would just be viral on TikTok or something.
Right, but then with AI, you wouldn't even know what to believe. That would be quite an interesting tale to begin with. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the comic book ran its first issue, or do you want to...
Yeah, let me just give a quick summary of the comic book. We follow Dana Cypress. She is a cop and her father Wayne is the sheriff of Wausau, Wisconsin.
I didn't know how to pronounce it, but yeah,
I
Wausau?
think yeah, I think it's Wausau, and
Mhm.
then, yeah, suddenly it kind of follows the aftermath of the dead coming back to life. We see that she's a single mother, and her son's name is Cooper, and then she's kind of working with her sister. Her sister has, like, kind of a dark past. I think that she might be a drug addict. She's, like, sleeping with her professor. Her name is M, and they are kind of trying to figure out, because these dead people, they have special abilities. It's like they're immortal in
Well,
some
A,
cases.
they're not evil though, right? Like when they come back to life, it seems like people would be scared, freaking out, but instead they're just like, "Hey, I'm home."
Right, some turn into, like, kind of like an evil form, though,
I
as we
had a
see it.
question. Are they like Deadites in Ash vs. the Evil Dead, where some of them are like corrupted by the time that they
Oh,
come back? Is it
definitely,
the
yeah.
ones that were like evil in real life who went to hell and they're just been so tortured that like when they come back they're just deranged?
I don't know, the show didn't go that far
Okay,
into it.
all right, something to think about.
But to for the episode itself, we start off very much like the comic book. It's actually the first scene. It's in a crematorium, and it plays out almost exactly the same. Randy, he is the cremator. He is kind of being interviewed or being filmed by May Tao. May Tao turns into a main character,
So this
kind
is
of
like
in.
Blair Witch Project. Do you see the little recording symbol or like Department
No,
Q?
no, no, this isn't from the camera's point of view.
Okay.
This is like, you see her filming it, though. She's trying to do a segment. She's kind of a journalist. She plays a bigger part in the comic book later on. This is the first scene only that that character is in, though, for the TV series. And suddenly, as he is about to press the button, he actually does press the button in the crematorium. That's when we see the dead start to rise. We hear knocking from the inside of the oven and screaming. We see people in trash bags kind of rising up. And that was something that I thought I understood it was one location for the TV series. I liked it a little more in the comic book because you saw from multiple locations of these dead people just starting to live, like in Good Samaritan hospitals, police departments, bridges.
Right. I can see it almost as you're describing, like a different panel of each side. You see a bunch of people coming back to life. But did you say trash bags? So like someone was in a trash bag.
Yeah.
Had someone already been murdered for well, obviously that lends itself. Was it M?
And well, no, but
Okay.
in the police department, that was where it was in the comic book, but in the crematorium, that's where the trash bag was in this TV
They were
series.
just keeping
So
spare body parts in there and
I guess, yeah.
it makes a little bit more sense that they have the power to regenerate, right? That they're able to come back and look normal. It would be kind of hard to explain how mom who died 20 years ago comes out of the grave looking fine and not have that explanation as, oh, they have some
I know
supernatural
one
ability as
person's
well.
naked. He's running across the woods naked because he doesn't have clothes, so I'm very interested how he died.
Is it Arnold Schwarzenegger? Does he have a gun? Is he looking for Sarah Connor? Yeah. So Wausau, I just wanted to say that Liberace's from there, and also the ex CEO of Yahoo. But yeah, it's a very small town, and it's legal to own a zebra there.
Yes, okay, so this was one of the saddest things I was talking about. This jumps a little bit, but it was a Zorse because the whole entire episode takes place about over this horse that they see is dead. And in the comic book, it was a half zebra, half horse. It looked really cool. In fact, even the second scene of the comic book is it running through the woods before it topples over and dies. But here they just changed it to a horse, and I was
Yeah,
sad
you want to take a wild guess why that was?
because there's no Zorses around.
Well, no, just because they couldn't afford to
It
CGI one.
The Zorse looked like one of the coolest things from the comic book. I really like that scene, even though there was no talking. And here, yeah, it was just kind of a normal horse.
So the way that they've tried to make this into a TV show is it's been for like 13 years in the running, and the thing was they just weren't able to do it. Luke Boyce had this idea, and it wasn't until he was working with Aaron B. Kuntz and Tim Seeley on The Revealer, which was like this cheap B horror movie that came out in the last year, that he finally was able to pitch it to them. And B. Kuntz was really the guy who was like, I can make stuff on a budget. If we go to Syfy, I think I can get this done. We just have to film it in Canada, in New Brunswick, and we have to use like a lot of local talent and stuff like that. But we can make it happen. But when it comes to like super big CGI, part of the reason why this is more, I think, a detective story than it is just a zombie story is because they knew that that would be easier to film.
Yeah, no, and also there's this big kind of force, almost a spirit in the comic book, and you never see it in the pilot. You maybe see like the back of its head for 1 second, but I was pretty sure that was just because of budget constraints.
Oh, I think they did say you would see something that like it was it introduced very early in the issue.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
They hinted that would actually they would be able to show that later on.
Right. So Then after kind of the crematorium scene, we get our intro to our main character, Dana Cypress. She is leaving Wayne's house because she is living with her dad. This was a change that from the comic because she's not living with her dad at the very beginning.
Isn't it weird how in cop shows that they're always living with their
Yeah,
parents?
it's
Like
very
Blue
strange.
Bloods, they always share the same thing. Good cop, bad cop.
Not only that, they always are working together, so it seems like there's some type of nepotism.
Oh, there's definitely a family relationship. It's like my dad was a cop, my dad's dad was a cop. But so
This was weird though because I felt like they were adding tension where it didn't need to be. In the comic book, Dana and Wayne, yes, they have a very tension-filled relationship, but I felt like this was just she didn't need to because Wayne's mad that she's leaving the house without telling him and also taking Cooper away, but it just seemed like they were adding tension where it didn't need to be because like I said, it's not from the comic book. Take it out because Dana's intro scene from the comic book is a couple scenes later. This would have saved time. This is like a 48-minute pilot.
yeah,
So
and the name of the episode is "Don't Tell Dad." So
that
what?
deals with the end of the episode. That's the last line said in the first issue of the graphic novel and of the episode.
Okay, and is that about M? I'm
Yes.
assuming because I
Yes.
do know this one twist, and so you should just jump to that because I am curious, like what you thought of that.
Well, okay. Yeah, M at the very end of the episode, she is stabbed by a crazy lady. And she is actually a reviver.
Yeah, but okay. So no, what I meant is like when do you find out that it's then that you found out that she already was dead and that she came back to life.
Right.
But because that's the case and that Dana didn't know, that means that she must have died like in the last couple days.
Right. And she doesn't have any memory of who the person who killed her is.
So the investigation into her murder doesn't actually happen in the first episode.
Yeah, in fact, the only way you knew she was dead was because at the very end of the first episode, she heals from like a chest wound
Yeah,
after she
it
was
seems like a
stabbed.
pretty rad ability. Why did this lady attack her?
Okay, well that kind of deals
Yeah,
with
go
the
ahead.
so going back, then Dana, even though she's in the middle of this argument with her dad, she is told the dad is kind of contacted about Randy, so Dana has to go and check what happened. Randy being the cremation person, and as she's on the road, that's when people start popping up, and they all don't know really what's happening. There's a little girl that's asking for her mom. That's when we see the back of the spirit's head for like 1 second, and that leads into the intro of the TV series.
Did you happen to catch the little girl's name? Was it 9-year-old Jordan Borchardt or something from the comic?
So the little girl is from the comic asking for her mom, but I'm not sure if that's her
The
or
only
not.
reason I bring up that person is because apparently she was the hairstylist's daughter, and so they actually like tried out 100 people, and she's the one who ended up getting it.
That might have been her then. But then this series does something very strange. It decides to do a time jump. We move a month forward, even though we've only been introduced to this world for like 6 minutes.
I get it. You know, it's like, again, the budget. They don't want to overload you with the zombies, the interactions of what could be like, it just seems very expensive. And this way, they're able to jump right into the investigation between Dana and M, right?
Yes, well, this was when we get M's intro scene, and it was strange because it seemed like for M, who is the second main character in the comic book, I learned more about her friend that comes in the scene, her that she's living with, her roommate, than I do about her. She's just in a bathtub, and I think it's just supposed to symbolize that her life is kind of in disarray because she's living in a pigsty, and she's not doing great. The place she's living is very, very small.
Sure.
But overall, it was just such a strange. That
So
also not in the comic book.
what do you learn about the roommate? What's so
The
important
so
about this
the
roommate?
yeah, there was this lockdown that happened because of all these people coming back.
Right. So whenever there's like one of these events that occur under the dome, glitch from WandaVision, Teacup, there's always a border.
Yeah,
Like they realize
right.
that they can't go too wide scale with it because then it becomes War of the Worlds and like you have to do or Walking Dead and everywhere is affected. But at least keeping it conserved to like a one town thing. What happens if they try to cross the border?
They didn't get into that, but actually, what happens in the comic book is that's actually where we are
There's
introduced to Wayne. Wayne, he goes to, and he's like, "How is Border Patrol going
so you
today?"
do get some outside the thing, but it's not yet.
In the graphic novel, yeah, they have that scene wasn't adapted into the TV series. series, but here, yeah, apparently lockdown has been lifted. The reason why I say we learn more about the roommate is we learned that the roommate was actually going to visit her brother in like Northwestern. We got some strange backstory because the character doesn't show up again for the rest of the episode. But I guess it's just supposed to show that she's sad. I wasn't a big fan of how they portrayed them. A lot of the intros for characters, including like Lester, who is this very old man who is where the horse is, the horse being the Zorse in the comic book. Dana has to go check it out, and she sees there's a lot of human teeth around. He's there just randomly in the middle of the woods, when in the comic book he's speaking to the receptionist in the police department. So it just seemed like a lot of introduction to characters were different, and I didn't see the need
Did
for
you have
it.
a favorite character out of
I think
everybody?
Dana, I think is the best actor in this series too.
Melanie Scrofano, also Syfy alum because of
Winona Earp, right?
Winona Earp and its sequel. She was also in Letterkenny. She's been around for quite some time. It's funny though because her dad is played by David James Elliott, who you might have seen in Heels.
Yeah, and I know he's a good actor, but I have to say his acting in this, I did not find that great.
And then you haven't mentioned who I feel like you would mention first. It's Stephen Ogg. He uh,
Stephen Ogg is in
he
this
he
series?
plays Blaine, who you might know from the comic book.
So Blaine, he is a villain that shows up in issue 2. He hasn't shown up in the TV series
Right.
yet, but that's played by Stephen Ogg?
And they changed him a little bit. He's more of a preacher in the TV show than I think he is in the
Yeah, he's like a weird motorcyclist villain
who likes Limp
in
Bizkit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so apparently Kuntz and him have some sort of prior relationship where he was able to talk to him and get him to sign on to it despite the limited budget. So don't tell Dad. We're about, what, halfway
We're
through the
about
episode?
like 10 to 15 minutes through the episode. She sees teeth, and then we get the scene from the comic book that starts it off with Dana, where she's telling Cooper to go to school. These bullies must be playing 8D chess, because Cooper, he goes into class before the teacher is there, and the bullies make a picture of his friend who is sitting right next to him and throw it at him instead of her. He unfurls it, he sees it's her, and it says zombie on the top of it. I'm not trying to give the bullies pro tips, but why would they throw it at Cooper was my question, instead of the person who's right next
Is he
to
trying
her.
to scare her?
No, no, no,
Or
no.
sorry, scare Cooper that she's a zombie?
No, they're trying to make fun of her because they say that she looks weird. That's what the photo is trying to show.
Also, they actually use the word zombie in this show.
Yeah.
That's weird. I thought that they only used revivals or something. Or yeah, I
No,
thought that
no,
was
no.
what they referred to each other as.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if even in the comic they use the word zombies. But then, yeah, about 15 minutes in, we see that Dana, she goes to work. She grabs a different donut that's in the than in the comic book. In the comic book, it's a raspberry cream.
And that's why you're giving it a bad rating. Is
No,
there a reason why that matters?
I don't know. Well, no. I just found it funny that it was a
It is.
different flavor because it's a chocolate donut in the
They
TV
couldn't afford
series.
raspberry cream. You see in Canada, those are extremely expensive in this day and age. Yeah, okay. So different donut.
And then she's called in by her dad, and it turns out that someone that there was a quick scene at the very beginning. Ibrahim, she was hooking up with outside of a bar, or about to hook up with, before she got the call to check on the horse. He's introduced a little bit earlier, actually, than in the comic book, and he's going to be helping out with the case. He's kind of trying to figure out why all these teeth
So he's her
are
partner in
out
this,
there.
right?
Okay, so partner in the comic book, but I don't know if he's partner in the TV show yet, because he seems like he's some type of
Like a consultant?
he's like in some type of lab and he's able to like figure out that the teeth are the same from the samples that they've gotten.
So he's the science dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andy McQueen, it's funny. I would know him because he was in the one with the motorcycle. What was that thing? The nun on the motorcycle.
Oh, Davis or something.
yeah,
Miss
Mrs. Davis. Miss
Yeah.
Davis. And so he played Jesus in that. So I saw his name here. I didn't recognize him. And I was like, oh my God, that's the same dude.
He's playing a comic relief type of Ibrahim, and that's something about the TV show that I didn't like as well. Maybe it's just sci-fi, but the writing was just like the lot of hokey jokes. Every character is very also sarcastic, it seemed like, kind of hard to root for a little bit in that sense. And the show looks strange as well. It's very gray, like you know what I'm
And that
talking
wasn't
about?
like the comic book?
Not really. It's like this is like a very like blue sepia tone show.
The gray makes a little bit more sense because if you look at like the 4400 or Glitch or The Returned, which was the 2015 show based on Les Revenants, which was the 2012 French show, which was based on the movie that came out in the 2000s called like They Came Back. All of those sort of have a gray atmosphere. Especially, I remember the gray cloud in 4400 that was like all of these dealt with people just returning home out of nowhere. Some of them used to be dead, some of them were assumed dead.
I guess, yeah, I guess it does kind of fit the environment now that I think about it. It just seemed a little mundane to me, but there were some parts of the show that I liked. I actually liked the scene where she went into the lab and they were able to tell that the teeth were from the same person. I felt like Dana made some logic jumps that were a little strange because she automatically was able to tell that these teeth were there because and someone moved the horse and it was a cover up. I wasn't exactly sure what happened there, but I
So
thought.
is this like people came back to life and then the horse started getting chomped on?
Yeah, well, I think it happened the same night of the horse.
Okay.
But that's where we see that revivals that, yeah, whenever you slice their skin, because they have a little bit of skin, they heal.
Yeah.
When they have.
Revivers have the ability to
Right.
regenerate.
We see it from Ibrahim. He gets a knife and they have some reviver skin and he slices it down and they are able to heal. Hence the reason why they're kind of immortal. But again, I like seeing that scene. Also, she has to go figure out Miles Miller. That's the name of a character that might have something to do with the horse. And he turns in, or we see that he is actually a reviver. And I thought one of the cool scenes was he gets his hands caught in a bear trap.
Mhm.
And that's where we see it heal. I thought that that looked good as well. And finally, we get to the end of the episode. I actually even like when M and Dana meet for the first time in the TV series. I thought it was more authentic than the comic book because she just randomly comes across her on a bridge. And here, M was waiting for a professor that didn't show up that night at a place that he told her to be, but she was on a bench. And I thought that that seemed, I guess, more realistic in that
That
sense.
she would run into her sister on a
On
bench?
a bench more than just on a bridge where she's looking off at the water or
So
something.
you've yet to explain the feral reviver.
Right. So let's get to the very end of the episode. Dana sees from a car description from Miles Miller when she was arresting him the same type of car at the very end of the episode, and it's owned by two people. So she stomps on the brakes, gets out, and is like, "What's going on here? What do you have to do with a horse?" And they're like, "There's no horse here." She hears clanking from the barn that she has. She goes into the back and she sees a ton of human teeth. And I thought one of the coolest shots is when we just see it in the background, but we see someone crawling on top of the roof and looking down at Dana. And then at the very end of the episode, we see it was this woman. This woman has been pulling out her teeth, and she's very old. She's mad that they're growing back. And then that's when this big fight scene happens. She kills the woman that was staying there, and I think she just knocks the man out. And then that's when Dana and her have a fight, and then the old woman stabs M,
Does
even
she
though.
stab her with the scythe that's in the cover?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we see like this guys go through her body. She is 100% dead, and Dana shoots her 6 times, uses all her bullets, and that doesn't end up having an effect on her. It reminded me a little bit of actually the barn scene in The Walking Dead, if you remember that. It was season 2, episode 7. But the lady in this TV series, she starts choking Dana, and right before Dana is about to die, that's suddenly when M slices off the woman's head, the
Yeah.
top of her head.
So she is like a deadite.
Yeah, no, and she's a reviver, and basically that's where the name of the episode comes in because the last thing she says is "Don't tell Dad," and then the story ends.
So when she dies, when M dies for the second time, and you see her body, does she like kind of go away for a second and then return, or is she always like conscious?
It's hard to tell because Dana ran up to her at the very end, right after she got stabbed, and it seemed like she was just trying to say something but couldn't get it out. But once she slices off the head, it seems like she's completely fine.
Yeah, it takes a second for it to fully take effect. It's interesting, both the main character, Dana, and also the feral reviver were both in Ready or Not.
Okay, well, so this was a strange thing. So there is a woman called Opal, and I'm not sure if she's ever named in the comic book and the TV series, but one of the things I didn't mention was she has a husband who ended up dying a day before all the people showed up and didn't move her from her house. So Wayne comes in and sees that Terry, that's the name of the dead husband, is there the whole time. His body is rotting away. Now, I think I'm correct about this. Opal, they like changed the characters in the TV show because Opal, again, I'm not sure if she's named, but she is the person that gets her head sliced off in the comic because she's looking for Terry in like the next few issues. So I thought that that was a strange thing where it's like they made one character into two.
It could be because, like, you're saying the feral zombie lady was Opal?
Yeah.
Okay, that's Arlene Stakowitz in the show. It's because it was played by Nikki Guadagnini. Oh my gosh, these names. So yeah, overall, that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, and I just thought that, like, also Derek, who is Dana's ex-husband and also Cooper's dad,
Sounds
isn't
like they
even.
had a big task of just introducing you to a
He's
lot
not
of
even. He's
questions.
not even in the TV series. I thought he wasn't going to be mentioned at all, but they pay reference to him. He's not even in the show. I thought that it was very convoluted. The jokes are terrible. The acting is hammy and definitely nothing to write home
So this
about.
isn't one of the best shows of the year.
Oh no, I'm going to be giving this a 3.5 out of 10. I thought that like where they ended in the TV show was fine. You could make a pilot off of the first issue, and there was a couple interesting scenes here and there, but overall I found it very boring.
Well, the thing that's interesting I found with Glitch was I also found that like really slow moving, and I think the return to where the way that I think the stories are presented with these are this is a slow burn zombie show, and usually when you see a zombie show, you're expecting bloodshed and fighting and stuff like that. And you're saying that the campiness also didn't work for it because it wasn't Z Nation.
Yes, I'm glad it wasn't gore porn though. I'm glad it wasn't that guts that you were talking about. I think.
Right. But what I'm saying is like the action isn't there, and that's partially because like we talked about with the budget. It's interesting. The reviews have been pretty kind thus far, taking into account that it is a low budget show. They say that the story itself preserves enough, and maybe because you haven't seen Stephen Ogg's the Blaine character, because he plays sort of a major villain role,
He was
right?
one of my favorite characters in the comic
And I
book.
think, yeah, so he comes along a little later. So maybe once you see that, would you be willing to give the show any future episodes?
You know what? To see Stephen Ogg and just to see how he like how he does his playing, maybe.
So maybe at the end of the year, this will be one of those ones where you get to like reevaluate it and see at the end what you thought. But 3.5 out of 10 from you. The dead people have returned with superpowers. Would you rather be a zombie like this show or a vampire?
Probably a zombie.
Because vampires also have like that we're gonna cure ability, like
Well,
they
you
can heal
can't.
quickly.
As a vampire, you can't go out in daytime, or else you're going to
That's
be.
true. You
You're
have a
going to
lot
be
of
like
things.
the guy at the beginning of this episode who's on fire.
However, I realize like even in this type of zombie show, there's never a cure to make you back to human. And
Actually, in Vampire Diaries, there was a cure.
that's what I'm saying. Zombies never have a
Yeah,
cure, but vampires very often have a cure. And that's just weird, isn't it? Like, I would say
yeah.
also werewolves never really have a
Because
cure
in The
either.
Walking Dead, there's never like a time where they're like, "So we figured out how to
You could list
disinfect the bite."
endless numbers of examples where they bring up a cure possible, but like it doesn't happen in zombie movies or TV shows. And in vampire shows and vampire movies, it seems to happen very, very often. So thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.